What's up, metal and heavy music fans? Today we have a review of Ministry and their new album Moral Hygiene via Nuclear Blast Records. And hey, if you like to be kept up to date with the best and brightest metal bands and albums from the underground and above, then stick with me by hitting that subscribe button down below. So given that the most recent output of this once highly lauded industrial metal powerhouse has been on the weaker side, I wasn't particularly excited for this 15th album when it was announced. Then Ministry dropped the singles, and in particular the Search and Destroy cover basically made me cringe into oblivion. All of that to say, I went into Moral Hygiene with some very low expectations. In fact, I anticipated ripping this thing to shreds despite my love for their early discography. But then I listened, and I had to ask myself, have we been trolled? I mean, seriously, this album had one of the worst marketing campaigns I've ever seen, utilizing what is easily the worst song on the entire album as a preview. So tell me, Al, are you going senile or just leaning into the same storm you stirred up with Antifa on the previous album? Was this all just some strange game of 4D chess? Because the rest of this album, it's actually quite good. First of all, Good Trouble was the other single and definitely a better indicator of what to expect from Moral Hygiene as a whole, with its methodical head-bobbing beat and focus on groove. It definitely sounds like something that would have been right at home on Filth Pig, and then the addition of the harmonica is a nice touch for a little extra personality. Alert Level is in a similar vein, also really cranking out the samples and sound bites of everything from news reports to Greta's speech on climate change. Oh yeah, and by the way, if you're not familiar with Ministry and would prefer to avoid music steeped in the current socio-political landscape, best you just turn back now. It feels more like Al's just making nihilistic observations alongside the rumbling bass and that classic Ministry guitar sound. And speaking of nihilism, I never thought I'd find myself seriously grooving out to a rising death toll counter. But that's precisely what you get on one of my personal favorite tracks, Death Toll. This almost danceable track is driven entirely by infectious beats and samples of literally just periodic updates on the rising number of deaths, side by side with the always mind-boggling insanity of everyone's favorite unhinged mega preacher, Kenneth Copeland. No other vocals, no guitar, just what seems like the perfect metaphor for how we're all just this-is-fining our way through the current global crisis.
The death toll is 200,000.
These themes continue in other sample-heavy and aptly named tracks like We Shall Resist and Believe Me. The former described by my significant other as something from the Matrix soundtrack, and mixed with some big, driving the Fragile era Nine Inch Nails influences as well. And the latter throwing in some acoustic guitar strumming and string flourishes to further step up the impact of its big chorus, which, while admittedly not quite to the same bombastic degree, actually reminded me of something off of a Dimmu Borgir album. Disinformation is another personal favorite of mine, with its more aggressive, chugging, squealing guitars and machine-like rhythms. This one has those old Psalm 69 and the mind is a terrible thing to taste vibes all over it, and it's absolutely delightful to hear as somebody who loved the old 90s sound. Alternatively, I also love Broken System, which, while still sporting the same type of robotic rhythms, is characterized by more of a bluesy, twangy guitar riff that makes for a very interesting contrast. It conjures imagery of cold, hard steel being worked by underpaid and underappreciated middle Americans. But really, I think that the best track on the entire album by far is the Jello Biafra feature on Sabotage is Sex. I didn't know that I needed a new Dead Kennedys Ministry crossover, but that combo absolutely slaps here. Jello's always insane and instantly recognizable vibrato goes with this industrial instrumentation like bread and butter. Now, all said and done, I will say that the songs drag on just a bit too long, which, to be fair, is a pretty typical problem of most Ministry albums. And then TV Song feels like a bit of a throwaway at the end. But again, I feel trolled. It feels like Al set me up with the lowest possible expectations on purpose so that I could now sit here before you and call Moral Hygiene one of the band's best albums in years. Could a man who looks like this actually be a secret genius? Turning to my scales, I give Moral Hygiene a 9 for enjoyability. Honestly, I can't stop listening to this thing. Drop Search and Destroy on TV Song and it's basically the perfect listen. I give it a 9 for musicianship. Understand that this is a 9 within the realm of industrial metal as a genre, but I think that they deserve it for all of the neat little special touches, and the level of arrangement here with the samples and layers is actually pretty impressive. And I give it a 7 for innovation. If you've heard one of Ministry's early to mid-career albums, you probably know pretty much what to expect from this one. So an 8.3 overall and a solid B for Ministry and Moral Hygiene. Honestly, I almost think it deserves a B+. But let me know what you think of this album down in the comments, and check out the tier list for my thoughts on the entire Ministry discography. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.